Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the 91st edition of Cotton Grower Magazine's Cotton Companion Podcast. It's good to have some warmer weather back across most of the cotton belt, and as we know, growers in the southernmost regions are already in the fields planting corn or other crops and getting ready for cotton. I'm Jim Steadman, Senior Editor of Cotton Grower, and as always, I'm joined by Cotton Grower Editor Frank Giles. Frank, we're starting to see some early signs of progress in these southern regions, the Mid-South and Texas. What are you hearing from your friends over in the Southeast?
Southeast has been wet the last several weeks. We did have some nicer weather over the weekend, and it's been really windy. So maybe it'll get things starting to dry out here. So field work can get rolling here sooner than later.
I'm sure, like most growers, they're just sort of chomping at the bit to get the tractors out and start moving dirt around. But with planting season for cotton quickly approaching, we want to take some time today to start talking about insects and not necessarily the ones we want to control, but the ones that help with control. Obviously, we're talking about beneficial insects, how to identify them, and some of the advantages they bring to the cotton field. And to help us with our discussion, Eddie McGriff, an Alabama Regional Extension Agent for Agronomic Crops and our own beneficial insect expert, is going to join us in the virtual Cotton Companion studio here in just a few minutes. But first, we want to take a quick look at some of the recent headlines from across the cotton belt.
If Fexapan was part of your plans for treating dicamba-tolerant crops and soybeans this year, you'll need to find another option. Corteva Agriscience has announced that it is discontinuing sales of Fexapan in the U.S. and Canada and will instead shift its resources and focus to support the Enlist weed control system. Fexapan was one of 4 dicamba formulations for dicamba-tolerant cotton and soybeans. Ingenia, XtendiMax, and Tavium are now the only registered dicamba formulations on the market. If you have already purchased Roundup Ready 2 extend dicamba-tolerant soybeans for the season from one of Corteva's seed brands, the company will allow the use of other registered dicamba herbicides on those crops. Some news for our listeners in the Pima cotton country, as Phytogen has announced it is adding a new variety, Phytogen 807 RF, to its Pima portfolio for 2021. The new variety was selected after consistently showing exponential yield increases in university trials with high quality lint and fiber characteristics, a greater yield potential and tolerance to Fusarium wilt race 4. Based on USDA planting data for 2020, Phytogen varieties were planted on 87% of U.S. Pima acres last year. Phytogen 807 RF is being positioned as a companion to Phytogen 881 RF, which is known as the industry Pima standard. And finally, AMVAC is now accepting applications for its 2021 Cotton Industry Advancement Scholarships. The scholarships, each worth $2,000, will be awarded to 7 qualified students. To be considered for the scholarship, applicants must be nominated by a practicing cotton consultant, have worked for a cotton consultant at some point between 2019 and 2021, and either be a senior in high school or currently enrolled full-time in an undergraduate or graduate level agricultural program at an accredited college or universities. Winners will be selected by a panel of judges and awarded based on the merits of their applications. 2 regional winners will come from the Southeast, Mid-South, Southwest, plus 1 winner from either California or Arizona. Nomination information can be found online at amvac.com/scholarship. To be considered, all applications must be complete and submitted by July 1st, with the scholarship winners being announced by August 13th.
Well, that's great. That AMVAC scholarship is really an excellent program. We visited about the scholarship last year on the Cotton Companion with Paul Vaculin from AMVAC, and I was certainly very impressed with their reasons for putting the program in place. It's really well conceived, and it has certainly benefited 20 plus students here over the last 3 years. So maybe we can bring Paul in again later this year to announce the 2021 recipients with us. But right now it's time to change focus and talk about some of our smallest allies in insect control. Frank, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest for today?
I want to welcome Eddie McGriff here today on the Cotton Companion virtual studio. Eddie is a agronomics crops Alabama extension agent, and we're here to talk about beneficials insects. But before we do, Eddie, welcome, and we're glad to have you here today.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Well, tell us a little before we get into beneficial insects. Just give us a little bit of background about yourself and your relationship with cotton over the years.
Well, my family has actually grown cotton since the 1700s. And I grew up in a small rural community in Coleman County called Fairview. And I went to school at Auburn, graduated in 1981. And soon after that, I started as a county agent in Southwest Georgia in Calhoun County. I was there for 4 years and then went to the very corner of the state almost in Decatur County and stayed there 17 years. Went to Coffee County for 10 years, which is in the southeast part of the state or the middle of the state. So I had about 30 years working in South Georgia as a county agent. All those counties were big cotton counties, so really got into the cotton. Peanuts was our other main crop. After that, I spent 4 years working as a multi-state agronomist for southern states before coming back to home to Coleman, North Alabama. I'm a regional agent now for agronomic crops. That's basically all the row crops, including cotton. And I work the northeast part of the state. So I have about 10 counties that I work.
Very good. Well, our listeners may have seen in Cotton Grower Magazine a series of articles that we're running that you have authored on beneficial insects. And we've gotten some good feedback on that. Tell us a little bit about what sparked your interest in beneficial insects. I know it's something that's often overlooked out there.
Well, I think what sparked my interest is when I first started as a county agent, of course, we had the boll weevil. And down in Southwest Georgia, we were making 15 to 18 sprays, sometimes as much as 20 sprays with non-selective pesticides. So we were basically eliminating most everything from the field. Well, when we got the boll weevil eradication program in place, there was some, a little bit of a hard time because we had a beet armyworm outbreak, which we may talk about in a little bit. But after we got the boll weevil eradication program in place, then we really started using less pesticides. Went from 15 to 18 down to about 5 or 6. And most of these were sprays for the budworm, bollworm complex. And then in 1996, with BT cotton, we really eliminated most of our insecticide sprays. We had some unintended consequences. When we were spraying, we didn't realize it, but after we quit spraying for the budworm, bollworm with the pyrethroids, we had an unexpected pest, and that was the stink bug. And I think stink bug is our #1 pest, at least here in North Alabama.
Eddie, just of course, looking over the articles that and information that you've prepared for Cotton Grower and that we've been publishing in it, I found the whole thing about beneficials. I've known about them obviously for a number of years, but I find it more fascinating to get involved in some of the details on it. What would you say to a grower that doesn't really believe or feel that beneficials do that much in their fields?
Well, probably the reason they don't think beneficials do that much is a lot of the beneficials that are carrying a heavy load is we don't ever see. That's those small wasps that are controlling aphids and worms and small insects that are getting the bollworm eggs and attacking other harmful insects. So a lot of these insects we don't see. And I divide them into 2 categories, and that's the predators. And a lot of the predators we will see. That's like the lady beetles and the lacewings and the fire ants, and then the parasites. And if a grower doesn't think that beneficial insects and I can include the insect diseases, don't help them. Just think about the aphid. We rarely spray for aphids. Their pressure will build up, and a lot of these beneficial insects will come in. As you see, a lot of different species of lady beetles, lace worms, lace wings. A lot of the insects are just keeping the population under control. And then we have the cotton aphid fungus come, and it's really regular. And once their populations build up, it completely wipes out the aphid populations within a few days. So if a grower doesn't think that's beneficial, then he's going to be spraying for aphids, several times if it wasn't for the cotton aphid fungus and these other beneficial insects. So I would say to this grower that beneficial insects, as Tennessee entomologist Scott Stewart said, they're a unique mode of action, but they're also free. He's getting the benefits. We're starting to kind of quantify how much benefit these beneficial insects are. We have a good study on the out in the far west by Peter Ellsworth, and their main concern there, one of their main concerns is whiteflies, and they actually have a scale that they use to determine when to spray, and that's based on the amount of beneficial insects that they have, especially 6 major species. And they have quantified that they get somewhere from $35 to $50 an acre benefit from beneficial insects. So that's something that the growers are getting free, that most of the growers out in Arizona and the far west realize that. But if a grower doesn't realize just how much beneficial insects are doing, I think they're missing the boat.
I can guarantee you that, as speaking from experience, by stepping into a couple of fire ant mounds, I don't think a lot of growers would really think those are beneficial at that moment when they're crawling up your legs.
No. And the fire ants will actually protect the aphids and feed on the honeydew. So when you're out there scouting, you'll get bit and stung several times just from them getting on to you. But my good friend who's just retired as a cotton entomologist after 48 years here in Alabama, Ron Smith, he said that insect, especially in conservation tillage, probably is the reason that we don't have to spray for escaped bollworms. So they're really doing a lot of times they're up in the at nighttime, they're up in the blooms, they're searching for these escaped bollworms and their eggs. And then if one does happen to mature and drop to the ground to pupate, they're on them also. So they're doing some heavy lifting, and we may not even realize it.
Eddie, you mentioned earlier the severe armyworm outbreak back in the 1980s. I did want to talk about that a little bit because I happened to be a cotton scout in Georgia when that occurred. And it was really pretty remarkable, some of the cotton fields I went in when those army worms were just completely defoliating fields. I remember one field I walked into, you could literally hear the frass dropping, hitting the leaves of the cotton that were still remaining, what little leaves were left, but you could hear it. And it was a very, very remarkable outbreak. Talk a little bit about what happened there and what we learned from that.
Even before the boll weevil eradication program, we didn't realize how much the beneficial insects were doing. And they had one beneficial insect called the Cotesian wasp. And what it will do is it will sting worms, and mainly the beet armyworm, lay an egg or eggs into that worm, and then the eggs will hatch out in the grubs. They'll feed in that worm. Of course, that worm immediately quits feeding. You can imagine if you had a growth in your body like that, they'll quit feeding, and then they'll hatch out, and they'll spin these little fuzzy cocoons that look like small grains of rice. So that's how you know you have the Cotesian wasp. I think one thing that was always interesting when I was coming out of college, they had a movie called Aliens, where they the monster in the movie or the alien, you know, put a egg into a human body and then it popped out. Well, I think they stole that from some of the beneficial insects. But what we were doing is when we started the boll weevil eradication and the diaphos sprays, we not only were spraying the fields, but we were spraying the borders and the edges of the fields. And this was something that we didn't do when we were spraying our other insecticides. So these Cotesian wasps, after these fields were sprayed before the boll weevil eradication program, their populations would rebound in the borders of the field and then come back into the cotton fields and help control the beet armyworms. And we didn't even realize it. But once we wiped them out along the edges, it was miserable. I mean, they were taking over cotton fields. They were burning up stems. They were attacking seedlings, something we never seen them do before. I remember a group of entomologists and farmers came to visit me, and they were on a tour of Georgia, and they were going to start the boll weevil eradication program in Texas. And they asked me what they could expect from it. And I told them, you can expect 2 years of hell, because during that time, the beet armyworms will just literally destroy your crop. And 2 years later, they called me back after they started, and they said, you were right. It was miserable. You know, there's a lot of publicity in Texas, especially down in the south part of the state, about how bad the beet armyworms were. So once we got the boll weevil eradication program in place, and once we quit spraying so much for the boll weevils, the Cotesian wasp populations rebound. We didn't have as many insecticide sprays, and we haven't seen a problem with beet armyworms since then.
Yeah, I remember it being remarkable that there were some stories of paved roads between two cotton fields that were slick because of cars running over the beet armyworms. That might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but it was bad.
Oh yeah, I mean it was a rough time to be a county agent, because you'd be getting all these calls from farmers. What can we do to control them? And we didn't have any insecticides that labeled or even available that would control the beet armyworms. And anything we sprayed actually made the problem worse. And the farmers naturally would want to do something. I told them the best thing we can do is nothing. And that's something they didn't want to hear. So in the county I went into, Decatur County, we went in, there was 380 acres, and within 4 years, we were growing 44,000 acres. And all these farmers said, you got us to grow this cotton. Now this worm is taking over. You really got us into trouble. And so it was really a bad time for me personally, but everything worked out after that.
Yep. You know, we talk about weed shifts due to technologies and you know, maybe are you seeing any newer pests, or maybe not new pests, but what are some of the insect pests in cotton that seem to be on the rise in the past few years?
Well, I think the biggest pest, as I mentioned before, for us is stink bugs. We need to really be on guard for stink bugs, scouting them, and you're looking at the damage. The other thing that we need to look at is we've done some research on spraying at one leaf stage using the thrips infestation predictor model to trigger a spray at one leaf spray, because with thrips, once you see the damage, you've lost a lot of yield potential. So you need to spray them early. They'll get into that small cotyledon, feed and keep feeding and keep damaging, delaying not only delay maturity and costing you yield. But this year or I should say 2020, we used the thrips infestation predictor model, triggered a spray at one leaf, and you could tell the difference year long. At the end of the year, we got 180 more pounds just from that one spray with Intrepid Edge, which is the product I like to use to control thrips because it's easy on the beneficials. And we don't want to trigger spider mites with our thrip sprays.
Very good. But before we wrap up here, you're a broadcaster yourself. I know you have done quite a few nice YouTube videos. Tell us a little bit about those videos and the topics you cover and where people can find them.
Well, they can find them on my YouTube channel, but I do, since I cover a broad range of crops, I do all crops. I interview the specialists and the researchers, and we'll actually go out in the field and show the problem or the pest. And then I do some in studio, and I also try to interview, I shouldn't say try, I do interview some of our top growers. And one thing I've seen about other growers is they like to see what other growers are doing that's been successful. So I've had several of our top growers on. Just recently, I've had the record holder for corn yield in Alabama talk about getting their planters ready, and that's been a popular video. I've also had Nick McMeekin, who was the farmer that we did the thrips trial on, and that's got a lot of views too. So I think farmers like to see what other farmers are doing. They like to see what other successful farmers are doing, and they really, you can tell them something, but if you show them what another farmer's done, they're more likely to adopt that practice or change what they're doing.
Fantastic. Well, I think with that, we'll wrap up the conversation here. Eddie, we really appreciate you joining us today, and we'll have you back sometime.
I appreciate it, Frank, and thank you for having me.
And that's it for this episode of the Cotton Companion podcast. As always, thank you, dear listeners, for joining us. If you like what you hear on the Cotton Companion, please be sure to spread the word and tell your farmer friends about this podcast. Here's how they can find us.
You can find the Cotton Companion in 3 easy ways. First, go to cottongrower.com/companion, or simply click the podcast tab at the top of the homepage. Second, subscribe to our channel on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts these days. And 3, sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, the Cotton Grower e-News, that's delivered to your email inbox every Tuesday morning. You can do that by going to cottongrower.com/subscribe. Also, be sure to follow Cotton Grower on social media. We are at Cotton Grower Mag on Twitter, and on Facebook, you'll find us by searching for Cotton Grower Magazine.
This podcast is produced by Tyler Hatch and Kim Henderson, our talented colleagues back at the world headquarters for Meister Media Worldwide in lovely Willoughby, Ohio. My name is Jim Steadman. His name's Frank Giles, and we'll be back with you in 2 weeks with another episode of the Cotton Companion. Until then, happy planting, and stay safe.
Yeah, he works and he works and he works and he works all day. God made a farmer.